How long should your bicycle tour be, and how far should you plan to cycle on any given day of your bicycle tour? We'll talk about both of those subjects in this video. I want to start by talking about the length of your bicycle tour because, as I mentioned previously, a bicycle tour can be as short as a single day or as long as several years. What many people don't realize when they're new to bicycle touring is the fact that most bicycle tours, most multi-day bicycle tours, are 1 to 2 weeks in length. And there's a very good reason for that, and the reason is time. If you're still working or holding a full-time job, oftentimes you can only really get a week or two off of work, or maybe you only want to dedicate a week or two of your annual vacation time to your bicycle touring adventures. So this is why so many guided and self-guided bicycle tours are designed around this 1 or 2 week gap that they know that people have in their work schedules. In my opinion, the 1 or 2 week long bike tour is a great length for a bicycle trip because if you start small, like if you start near your home, for example, and you start doing weekend style tours 2 or 3 days long, that's a great way to get started. But I don't think that until day 4, day 5, day 6, that's when you really start to get the full-blown long-distance bicycle touring experience. And there's things that happen on a longer tour, I'm going to say after 5 days, on a longer tour, past 5 days, that you simply do not have happen to you when you're doing a shorter bicycle tour. There are certain things that kick in after 5 days on the road. For example, your fitness levels improve quite a bit. You start to get into a routine. You figure out which packing methods are going to be working best for you. You figure out the area that you're in. And also, over the course of 5 days, for example, you can cover a much longer distance than you can in just 2 or 3 days. So 5 days for me is really like the pushing point. Like if you can get to 5 days, then you can really start to experience some of the benefits of bicycle touring that you don't get with much shorter weekend style tours. A lot of people who come to me and find out that I've been bicycle touring around the world for years and years and years think that that's the only way to bicycle tour, but you don't need to go for years on end in order to be a successful bicycle tourist. In fact, you don't even have to go for months on end. 1 to 2 weeks is really all you need to conduct an incredible bicycle touring adventure. That being said, I know many of you want to conduct much longer bicycle tours, whether it be a month long, 2 months long, 3 months long maybe, or even longer, maybe several years as you cycle across several countries or continents. Traveling for months or years on end is different than going on a 1 or 2 week long bicycle tour because with a 1 or 2 week long bike tour, no matter where you come from on the bicycle touring experience spectrum, even after like 2 days on the road, you can see the end of your tour. If your trip is only 7 days long, most people can say, okay, there's only 5 days left. I can make it. I'm gonna do it. You know what I mean? That's very different than if you start a long distance bike tour, let's say a 90-day bike tour, and you get 2 days into it and now you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have 88 more days left. That's very different from a mentality standpoint. So that's where I think the biggest leap comes from. Like there are not a lot of skills that you're going to need to differentiate yourself or to succeed more as a long distance bicycle tourist conducting a multi-month long bike tour than somebody who's doing a much shorter week-long tour. Like the skills on the bike and off the bike are very much the same. The major difference is your mental outlook, because it can be very discouraging for a lot of people to start a bicycle tour, have it be maybe some difficulties at the beginning or whatever, and to be thinking very much about the final destination, which is so very far away. So when I get into the mapping section of this course, I'm going to be showing you how I motivate myself from a mental standpoint to collapse the distances that I conduct on my bicycle tours. And so I take a, let's say a 3-month, 90-day long bicycle tour and break it up into chunks. And that way I'm not necessarily thinking about my bike tour as a 90-day bicycle trip. I'm just thinking about the current little chunk that I'm in right now. So I'm right here, and the ultimate goal is to get way over here, but what I do is I break the tour up into, let's say, 5 different chunks. And so now, instead of trying to get all the way over here, I'm just trying to get to right here. And then once I get to this point, then I set my destination on this next point, the second closest point. And I do that again and again and again until I reach the final destination, 5 points away, right? So I'll talk about that some more in another video. But for now, just keep that in mind that, you know, a 1 or 2 week long bicycle tour, it's very easy to be here and to see the end and to think, okay, I'm getting closer to it. But when your trip is incredibly long and you're on a daily basis making progress like this and only very slowly getting closer to your final destination, it can be very difficult to keep your motivation up. So keep that in mind on a long distance bike tour, that you're going to have that problem once you get out on the road, and you need to have a strategy that you can use to overcome that once you're out there. Now, I just spoke about how I mentally break my bicycle tour up into several different chunks, and I'll talk more about that later. But I also want to mention that many people who do long distance bicycle tours break their bike tours up into chunks and do those chunks on an annual basis. So for example, many people want to cycle, I'm just again going to say, from Los Angeles, California to New York City. And they want to do that whole trip. Now, if you're an average bicycle tourist, that trip is going to take you about 3 months. So again, 90 days. But most people don't have 90 days off of work each year. And so what a lot of people will do is they'll break that trip up into, let's say, 2 week chunks, right? And so now they've taken 90 days and they've said, I only have 2 weeks off of work each day. So the first year they ride from Los Angeles to, I don't know, the Grand Canyon or something like that. And then they go home at the end of that trip. The following year, they fly to the Grand Canyon, begin their bike trip there, and cycle to Denver, Colorado, right? Then they go home from Denver, Colorado, come back the following year, fly to Denver, Colorado, and then bike from there to Chicago, Illinois, right? And then the next year they go from Chicago to New York or whatever. I made that into 4 sections, but you can see what I'm saying. My point is that if you want to do a long distance bicycle tour, but you don't necessarily have the time to do it all in one big stretch, that is a strategy for breaking your bicycle tour up into smaller segments. It also makes your big bike tour much more attainable because you've now taken a 90-day bike tour, for example, and broken it down into little 2 week segments. So it's very easy over the course of several years or several months, for example, to do a consecutive 2 week bike trip and then take a big break, and then do another 2 week bike trip and then take a big break, and do another 2 week bike trip and take a break. And I've done that myself with my bicycle tours all around the world. Some of my bike tours have been as short as a month or less, actually, even. And some of my bike tours have been as long as a year, 14 months, 18 months, etc., where I was just going non-stop. And I can tell you based on my own experience that the longer your bicycle tour is, the more you need to consider breaking that bike tour up into manageable segments. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about the overall length for your bicycle tour. Starting off with 2 to 3 day bike tours is a great way to get started, especially in your local area. But I don't think you're going to have those big life-changing experiences necessarily until you do a 5-day bike tour or longer. And I'm making some generalizations there about 5 days. It could be 4 days or whatever. It's going to vary from person to person. But I think that the 5-day plus 5-day to 21-day bike tour, like that's kind of where the magic happens for a lot of people. And then finally, if you're planning a much longer bicycle tour, whether it be several months or years on end, you need to figure out a way to break your bicycle tour up into manageable segments. Whether those segments are physical places, like you could say, I'm going to do a bike tour just across California, and that's one segment, and then when I get to Arizona, I'm going to do another bike tour across Arizona, and another bike tour across New Mexico. You could break your tour up that way. Or you could break it up into time segments. So you have 2 weeks and you do a 2 week stretch and then you take a break or whatever. And then you do another 2 week stretch and you take a break, etc. So just keep that in mind as you move forward with your own bicycle touring plans, is that you want to plan your bicycle tour in such a way that it not only allows you to reach your final destination, but allows you to maintain motivation throughout the course of the tour. So you don't want to have 2 points very, very far away. You want to have those 2 points, but with a bunch of little points of interest and motivation along the way to get you from here to here. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, one of the main questions that I get asked from newbie bicycle tourists is, how far should I plan to cycle in a given day? Some people, the people that probably make the biggest mistake, never ask this question at all. And those are the people that usually plan to cycle 100 plus miles or 160 kilometers or more in a single day. And while that is entirely possible, most people conducting long-distance bicycle tours cannot maintain those sorts of distances over the course of several days, weeks, months, or years. That being said, the average length for a bicycle tour is usually 30 to 60 miles per day, which is about 50 to 100 kilometers per day. So that's the sort of range that most bicycle tourists cover over the course of a single day. And I think that's a good distance, anywhere from 30 to 60 miles, 50 to 100 kilometers, because this distance allows you to not only cover a significant amount of road, but it also gives you time throughout your day to do other things. And that's a very, very important part of bicycle touring for a lot of people. Some people do come to bike touring and they want to cover as much ground as they possibly can in the shortest amount of time. And that's fine if they want to do that. But for most people, they want to have a bicycle tour that is enjoyable. Bicycle touring is meant to be enjoyable. And that's what differentiates it from a lot of different other types of cycling. Road cycling, for example, oftentimes the importance is stressed on speed or cadence or time. And for bicycle touring, really that's not the goal. The goal, for most people at least, is to have an enjoyable cycling experience. So the 30 to 60 mile daily distance is a good distance to have because it allows you to cover that ground, but also have time to stop along the way and take pictures and talk to people and eat new foods and explore any of the places that you might happen to come across. So 30 to 60 miles per day, just keep that in mind. 50 to 100 kilometers per day. And again, in my previous video, I was talking about the websites at biketours.com and gobicycletouring.com. If you go to those two websites and look at the guided or self-guided bicycle tours that are being offered there, what you will see is that the daily distances are usually between 20 kilometers all the way up to 100 kilometers per day. So on guided bicycle tours and self-guided bicycle tours, where much of the time the focus of the tour is not just on cycling, but having an overall positive experience, the distances each day are much, much shorter. And that is my big advice to you is, if you want to have an enjoyable bicycle touring experience, don't plan on covering too much ground on any given day. So 30 to 60 miles per day is average, 50 to 100 kilometers per day. That's what most people do. Your first day on the road, however, should be much, much shorter than that. And the reason your first day needs to be shorter is because on the first day of your bicycle tour, you're going to have issues that pop up that won't generally pop up on other days of your bicycle trip. For example, on the first day of your trip, you're going to be packing all your stuff onto your bike. There might be certain things that you've loaded onto your bicycle on the first day that you've never loaded on the bike before. For example, food, toiletries, etc. Oftentimes when people are preparing for their bike tours, they don't put these final items on their bike because they're using them or don't need them during the planning and preparation process. But once you actually begin your bicycle tour and you load the bike up with food and water and toiletries and every imaginable thing that you think you're going to need for your trip, then suddenly your bike becomes heavier, things move around differently, you might need to adjust your bicycle in some way, like maybe you need to shift your handlebars forward, or your brakes are a little messed up or something like that. And so on your first day on the road, you don't want to have a super long distance that you have to cover in that day, because you want to have the time to be able to stop and adjust your bicycle, make any repairs that might need to be made, etc., etc. So generally what I tell people is that you should plan your first day on the road so that the distance is half or less of what you might do on any other given day. So if you're planning to cycle, let's say 60 miles per day on your bicycle tour, your first day on the road should be no longer than 30 miles. If you do want to cover super long distances, let's say 100 miles or 160 kilometers per day or more, that is possible, and a lot of people do that, but like I said before, it makes your bicycle tour a race, essentially, because from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you're going to be on your bicycle, and you're probably not going to have a whole lot of time to stop along the way and enjoy yourself. In addition to that, 100-mile days or 160 plus kilometer days are tiring. And one of the things about bicycle touring is that you don't want to tire yourself out. As I mentioned before, bike touring is a marathon. You don't want to necessarily get so tired at the very beginning that you can't finish at the end. And that's what happens to a lot of people who try to conduct long distance bicycle tours covering very, very long distances each and every day, is that they tire themselves out at the beginning and are unable to finish the trip as they initially planned. Another thing that you need to keep in mind when you're planning your schedule for your bicycle tour is not only how far you're going to be cycling each day, but also how many rest days you're going to take throughout your bicycle tour. Most people traveling by bicycle will take one rest day per week, and sometimes more depending on the length of your tour and your personal preferences. But if you're conducting a long distance bicycle tour, you need to factor in your rest days, because let's say you're planning a 90-day bicycle tour across the United States. If you were, let's say it's 3,000 miles. 3,000 miles, 90 days. If you're to do the math, I think that's 33 miles per day, which doesn't sound too bad. But then you have to factor in that there's 1 day or 2 days at the beginning of your trip that you're going to take just to get to your destination, maybe the starting destination of your trip, put your bike together, that sort of thing. There's 2 days at the end of the trip to pack your bicycle up and prepare for the trip home. So there's 2 days gone. Then there's all the rest days that you're going to take throughout there as well. So let's say now, so a 90-day trip, let's say you took one rest day per week, right? So I'm going to say 90 divided by 7, that's 13 weeks basically. So that's then 13 days less from your bicycle tour that you'll be cycling. So 13 days throughout the course of the trip, plus let's say 4 days at the beginning and the end, so 17 total days less that you won't be cycling. So instead of covering 3,000 miles in 90 days, you're now covering 3,000 miles in 73 days. So instead of having to now cycle 33 miles per day, you're going to now cycle, I'm doing the math here, divided by 73, now going to have to cycle 41 miles per day on average. So do you see that? That basically almost added like 10 whole miles per day that you're going to have to do more to your trip because of the scheduled rest days. So that's very, very important that you keep that in mind as you plan your bicycle tours, is not only how far you're cycling and how many days you're ultimately going to be out on the road, but also how many rest days you're going to take along the way. One of the most important things that I think I can say about planning the distances for your bicycle tour is that bicycle touring is meant to be enjoyable. And for most people conducting long distance bicycle tours, the goal is not necessarily to cover the longest distance in the shortest amount of time, but to cover a long distance and have fun and enjoy yourself and learn new things along the way. So keep that in mind as you plan and prepare for your bicycle tour. Don't get caught up in thinking that you're going to see more necessarily by cycling super long distances in a single day. What actually happens oftentimes is that if you plan to cover super long distances, you actually see less, because you're basically having to zoom past a lot of areas that if you had scheduled shorter distances, you'd be able to get off your bike, stop, explore, talk to people, etc., etc. Whereas if you just plan a super long distances each and every day, you're going to go past the people, places, and experiences that are ultimately going to make your bike tour more memorable. Bicycle touring is not a race. Like, it's not a competition. It's just you out there on the road doing your thing. So ultimately, your daily distances, that whatever they be, are up to you. If you want to do shorter distances, like 30 to 60 miles or 50 to 100 kilometers might be average, but that doesn't mean that you can't do less. Like, a lot of people do 20 or 30 mile days, and that is perfectly fine. And I've done several short days in the past where I've maybe only cycled 10, 20, 25 miles over the course of the entire day, and I had a blast doing it. So don't feel bad for doing less than 30 miles per day or less than 50 kilometers, in much the same way that you shouldn't feel bad for trying to do more than that if that's what you want to do. One of the biggest mistakes that I think a lot of beginner bicycle tourists make is that they think that their friends, family members, loved ones, coworkers, or whatever are going to be impressed, or more impressed perhaps, if they cover a much longer distance in a shorter amount of time. And that's where this race mentality oftentimes comes from, I think, is that people think like, oh, if I go 3,000 miles in 2 months, people are going to be way more impressed if I do 3,000 miles in 3 months. But based on my own experiences, most people don't care about these sorts of things. The only person that really cares about that is you. A lot of people ask me how many total miles or total kilometers I've done in my lifetime. The truth is, I have no idea, and frankly, I don't care. After my 3rd year of bicycle touring, I realized that everything past that number was just going to be a big number and people would be impressed no matter what. So I think in my 3rd year of bike touring, I had maybe done 10,000 miles or something like that. But I realized that people were going to be just as impressed by me saying I've cycled 10,000 miles on my bicycle as they would be if I said I've cycled 100,000 miles on my bicycle. Or if I've cycled 100,000 miles now, people are going to be just as impressed with that as if I said I've cycled 300,000 miles. So I don't know. I think that a lot of people get too caught up on, it's maybe partially ego a little bit, thinking that other people will be impressed by your daily distances or the overall distance of your tour. My experience, and based off the experience of dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds or thousands of other individuals that I've talked to about this subject, most people don't care about such things. The only person that really cares about that is you. So if you want to cycle a super long distance in a short amount of time, don't do it for other people, do it for yourself. And I think the same thing can be said for bicycle touring as a whole. I think it's best to not make any decisions really for your bicycle tour based on what other people think or other people want. Bicycle touring is largely a selfish endeavor, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So make the trip enjoyable for you. Do what you want. Whether that means camping, staying in hotels, traveling with the person that you want, riding a certain distance each day, whether it be super short, somewhere in the middle, or maybe even a crazy long day, whatever. You are ultimately in charge of your bicycle tour, and you can do it however you want. Just don't do it for other people, do it for yourself. Another thing to keep in mind is that bicycle touring is a long distance endeavor, and you don't want to do anything throughout your bicycle tour that's going to jeopardize the entire tour as a whole. Now, for a lot of people that means trying to start their bike trip too fast or go too far at the very beginning of the tour. That's the mistake that so many people make. It's the same mistake a lot of marathon runners make. They go out too fast at the beginning and are unable to finish at the end. As a long-distance bicycle tourist, your goal is to reach that ultimate destination, and you do that generally by finding a pace that is comfortable for you and then maintaining that pace throughout the entire tour. So even though your daily distances are going to vary from day to day, one day you might do 30 miles, the next day you might do 40 miles, the next day after that you might do 60 miles and then drop back down to 30 miles again the following day. That happens as you're conducting a long distance bicycle tour. You're never going to cycle the exact same distance each and every day, but you want to find a range of distances that you are comfortable with and that you can do repeatedly day after day after day. Your goal at the end of your day every day on your bicycle tour is to finish the day feeling good. You want to finish your day in such a way that you look back on the experiences you had that day and think, wow, that was a great day of cycling. So many awesome things happened, and I can't wait to do it again tomorrow. You don't want to finish any day of your bicycle tour where you crawl into camp at the end of the day and you're tired and wet and hungry and sore and thinking to yourself, this is the most important part, and thinking to yourself, there is no way I can do this again tomorrow. Or there is no way I can do this again for the next week. Or there is no way I can do this again for the next year. That is not how you want to finish any day of your bicycle tour. There are going to be difficult moments on your trip, but the thing about bicycle touring is that it is a long distance endeavor, and you have to keep the end goal in mind. So you don't want to necessarily push yourself too hard up that big hill that you're climbing. You can do it, you're going to reach the top, but you're going to be dead tired, and it might make you think about whether you want to continue up the road the following day. So keep that in mind as you go forward. What you want to do is you want to finish each and every day in such a way that you're feeling good, you're happy, you get some rest, you get some food in you, and the following morning you wake up and you think, I can't wait to do it all over again. Ultimately, what you get out of your bicycle tour is going to be largely up to you. People come to bicycle touring for different reasons. Some people want to get into nature, to lose weight, to meet new people, to try new foods, to go through historically interesting areas, etc., etc., etc. So the goal that you set for yourself on your bicycle tour is going to be very different than the goals that somebody else sets on their trip. If your goal is to get into nature, to maybe paint along your bike trip or write poetry or something, you're going to want to plan much shorter days than somebody who has a goal of covering a long distance just so that he or she maybe can lose weight, or to train for a bicycle race that he or she might be participating in the future, or something like that. So as you can see, your goals very much dictate the distances that you should be covering each day. So it's kind of up to you. What is your goal with your bicycle tour right now? What do you want to get out of the experience? And if you're telling yourself right now that like you want to try new foods or stop and see museums along the way, then you need to plan much shorter distances than maybe the average bicycle tourist. All right, so that's everything I have to say about daily distances and the overall distance for your bicycle tour. We'll talk about some of these things again when I get to mapping and I show you how I map out specific routes and how you can map out your ideal bicycle touring route. But for now, that's what you need to know. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can ask me on the Bicycle Touring Pro Coaching Program Facebook page or in an email. And we will be conducting a live Q&A session very soon where you can ask me any questions that you might have at that time, and I can elaborate more on some of the points that I made in this video. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video very soon.